No? Okay, there we go. Good morning. There we go. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Reading's in-person and virtual Sunday worship service. My name is Charlene Reynolds-Santo, and I use she, her pronouns. Whoever you are, wherever you are from, whatever your faith tradition, whoever you love, you are welcome here. All are welcome here as we gather to create an understanding, welcoming, and family-friendly community. Here we nurture and explore individual spirituality, work to build a strong, loving community, and to help heal our beautiful and broken world. If this is your first time with us, I would like to extend a special welcome. And if you haven't already, please look at our webpage at uureading.org for more information about UUCR. Here you can learn more about this beloved community, make connection with our staff, and for those here in the sanctuary, if you have any questions, please ask anyone here involved in today's service. You can speak to us after the service in Fellowship Hall. Thank you.
There's so much beautiful energy here this morning. Wow, I'm loving it. Good morning, everyone. My name is Reverend Laura Solomon. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am the minister here at UUCR, and it is a privilege to serve this community and the world with you. I invite you all to settle in this morning, take a breath. Allow yourself to arrive fully present here. Our opening words come from Joyce Sutphin, titled, How to Listen. Tilt your head slightly to one side and lift your eyebrows expectantly. Ask questions. Delve into the subject at hand or let things come randomly. Don't expect answers. Forget everything you've ever done. Make no comparisons. Simply listen. Listen with your eyes as if the story you are hearing is happening right now. Listen without blinking as if a move might frighten the truth away forever. Don't attempt to copy anything down. Don't bring a camera or a recorder. This is your chance to listen carefully. Your whole life might depend on what you hear. Let us worship this morning. We light our chalice with Unitarian Universalists all around the globe. I invite you to call into your heart the flame you kindled this morning, the flame of love, of justice, of commitment to community. Please join me in reciting our chalice lighting words. They can be found on the laminated sheets in the back of your pews. In the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire of commitment, we gather this day. May the flame we now kindle be to us a symbol of the holiness we seek. Each week we recite our children's affirmation as a reminder of the most important elements of who we are. If anyone would like to help me with today's children's affirmation, you are welcome to come up. It is so good to see so many of you. We have our first day of religious education today, and there are so many friends here excited for religious education. This is so wonderful. Welcome, 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 everybody. We are Unitarian Universalists, the Church of the open mind, the loving heart, and the helping hands. Thank you all.
Go down the stairs.
we are going to rise in body or in spirit and sing our opening hymn, number 123, Spirit of Life.
Hi, everybody. It's the time for all ages. So if you would like to come forward and come sit on the floor, you are welcome. Anybody who is a kid or a kid at heart, come on up. We're going to play a game. Good to see you. Today we're talking about deep listening, and I have my singing bowl today because we're going to start with a game. I'm going to ding the chime. When you hear the sound, raise your hand, and when the sound goes away, put your hand down, and everybody can play. Let's play one more time. Let's see how long we can hear it. Really good listening. Yeah, good listening, everybody. Well, thank you. I know. Well, thanks for that deep listening with me, everybody. I have to tell you a cool fact, and it's that kids have amazing listening ears. Kids can even sometimes hear sounds that grown-ups can't. Isn't that cool? Yeah, it's really neat. Kids also have very clear intuitions. Anyone know what intuition is? No? Nobody? Okay. Well, have you ever had the feeling that you just know something? Maybe you don't know why or how, but you just know. It's often called a gut feeling. Anybody ever felt that? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which means a gut feeling is something you know deep in your heart or in your belly, instead of something you learned in your brain. Here's an example. You're out on a walk, and you could turn this way or this way. And something deep inside you says, this way is the way to go. You trust that feeling, and you run into a friend on the path, or maybe you find a beautiful tree or a hidden river. This inner knowing is called intuition, and the more you trust it, the more clear it becomes. Has anybody had an experience like that before? Anybody? Do you want to share? Anyone have one you could share? Yeah?
When I know something's wrong,
Yeah.
like my friend tells me, I don't know, like jump off of something, and I'm like, I know this is wrong, even though I've never tried it,
But you know.
but I know it's wrong, so I don't.
Thank you. That's a great example. Tell me your name again. Charlotte. Oh, yeah. Charlotte says when she knows something's wrong, even if she hasn't tried it before, but she just knows. She has a feeling about it. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Any more examples, Holly?
So like when I'm in my room,
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to figure out what toy to play with.
Yeah.
And I choose this one or this one.
Yeah, you have choices to make and something says, this is the one. Anyone else? Last examples of your intuition, your deep knowing before we go on? Oh yeah, you have one? Okay. Okay, well a big question is, how do we hear our inner knowing? There are times when our brain can get so busy and so full of our thoughts chattering that we might not hear our intuition. In my example of going on a walk, our minds were quiet, so we heard our intuition say, this way. If our minds were chattering things like, well, this way might take too long, or this way I might get lost, and it's kind of getting cold, and what am I going to eat for dinner? We might not have heard our intuition whisper, this way. So the next time you have a decision to make, or you want to hear your intuition speaking to you, here's what to do. First, we have to help our brain get quiet. So let's do this by relaxing our shoulders. Everyone can do it. Relaxing your face. And let's take 2 breaths. Nice. Then, let's make sure we don't have any fearful energy in our body. Let's fill ourselves with loving energy. So I invite you to put your hand on your heart and think of somebody you love very much. Let's take a second. Bless you. Bring that person to your mind. And let's take one more breath. Now, if your inner knowing has something to say to you, you will hear it, gentle and clear. Thanks, everybody. And we are going to religious ed classes today, so it's time to sing the children out.
We take time during our service to light our candles of community, peace, and justice. We light our red candle of community to signify our interconnection. Wherever you are, in time or space, newcomer or longtime member, here in the sanctuary or joining us virtually, we hold you in love. I want to let you know that there will be an open house for Joyce Barilak at Judy's house in Reading. Thank you. More information can be found in her obituary that can be found online. Next Sunday will be the open house from 2 to 6 p.m. I invite you to take a breath. Call into your mind and heart the people who are with you today, the people you bring with you, and speak their name aloud, that we might bring them fully into this space. Today we are going to light our blue candle of peace and our yellow candle of justice together. Tomorrow, October 7th, marks the one-year anniversary of the terrorist attack that began the ongoing Palestinian genocide. Unitarian Universalists for Justice in the Middle East shared a resource guide for those of us addressing this anniversary in worship today, which included this poem. I invite you to look upon our candles of justice and peace and let these words from the Reverend Drew Patton fall upon your hearts. If ever they ask you, which side are you on? Tell them plainly, I side with the people, with the precious ones, all the integral, the soft and the fierce, irreplaceable, the beloved, if only by God and trees, who were born, who breathe and survive. Say, I side with those who keep watch beneath the screaming arc of bombs, with those who hide in dark doorways or who through the moonlight flee, with those who stay and fight, and with those kept up all night by hunger and grief and terror and rage, by desperate, unruly hope, who are good and green at the root, who are more than the worst they've ever done, who do their best to love and still pass on the hurt in themselves that they hate. But what when they take sides against each other? The people, even against themselves, side with what is human in them, what is fragile and feeling and flesh. Side with the truth of our stories, side with the fact of our pain, side with defiant insistence on freedom, side there again and again, side there today and tomorrow, side there the rest of your life, side there together until we belong, each one to every other. If ever they ask you, which side are you on? Say, it doesn't work like that. Tell them you side with the people and abide where the people are at. Let us turn inward in the spirit of prayer and meditation, that we might hear the prayers of our own hearts. Amen. If you have a joy or a sorrow you would like to honor through lighting a silent candle, you are invited to come forward now.
Our reading today is a poem many of you are probably familiar with, The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. This reading was chosen for today not only because it speaks beautifully to the topic of listening deeply to oneself, but also because the choir is going to sing a gorgeous version of this poem immediately after we hear the words. I invite you to focus on the words as you listen to the poem, and then allow the experience of this beautiful piece set to music to wash over you. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one travel, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps a better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though, as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how ways lead on to ways, I doubted I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference.
Diverged
almost hate to preach after that. That was the whole sermon right there. Thank you all. One of my rituals for sermon writing on Fridays has become that I put on my most comfortable clothes, put in my earbuds, and walk from my apartment in Andover down the street towards town. As I walk, I pay attention to what's around me, to myself. I notice what's blooming, what has changed. This week, the trees are much more yellow, and the hydrangea is still blooming, but looking dry and a little tired. I allow myself to empty my mind and try not to think too hard about what I'm trying to write about, but focus instead on what is present. I then pick up a cup of coffee, because that's a necessary part of sermon writing. And then I continue down the street to the library. I have a particular table I nearly always sit at, a high-top table near some big windows and an electrical outlet. And somewhere along the way, nearly always, my voice gets quiet, and I can hear the sermon that needs to be written. Sermon writing, I have learned, is a lesson in listening. This week I got to the library but wasn't quite settled yet, so I decided to browse some books, giving my body and mind time to settle, or perhaps time for the coffee to kick in. I held the intention of our October theme in my mind. Deep listening is the theme for this month, and deep listening to ourselves, the theme for this week in particular. So after browsing my favorite young adult section, I wandered down the stairs, turned into a room I don't usually frequent, and there, on the display shelf, right inside the door, was a little book called How to Listen by Thich Nhat Hanh. It's funny what happens when you listen, isn't it? As I've said before, I am as agnostic as they come. Whether or not there is a capital G God or a lowercase g God is not for me to answer, but I do believe in listening. I believe in listening, and I believe something changes when we listen to that voice that we, each of us, have within us. Whether you call that voice God or spirit or intuition or conscious or Jiminy Cricket, there is something that happens when we quiet ourselves and allow that voice and presence to be known. I wish there was a better, less ableist word I could think of than listen. To be clear, I'm not talking about listening with our ears. I'm not talking about hearing sounds or voices. I'm talking about knowing, about stilling, about quieting our minds and our bodies so that is what is present within us can be known. In the adorable little book by Thich Nhat Hanh, he writes, most of us have a radio constantly playing in our head, tuned to the station Radio NST, Radio Nonstop Thinking. Most of this is unproductive thinking. The more we think, the less available we are to what is around us. Therefore, we have to learn to turn off the radio and stop our thinking in order to fully enjoy the present moment. Perhaps what I mean by listening is not so much paying attention to the thoughts, but turning off or turning down Radio NST so we can be present to what is underneath. What you do to turn off Radio Nonstop Thinking is probably different than what I do, and there are no wrong answers. For some people, it's running or working out. For others, it's a nap or gardening or quilting. Maybe you call it mindfulness or meditation or prayer. Maybe you just call it your first cup of coffee in the morning or your last cup of tea before you go to bed. It matters not how you turn off radio nonstop thinking, but it matters that it happens. And I believe it matters not just for us personally, but it matters for all the circles and people and institutions we touch. Because in order to work for the change we want in the world, we ourselves need to be present, listening to ourselves and to others. We need to listen and be present to the suffering in ourselves and in others. It is only through that practice that we can expand our capacity for listening and for presence. Thich Nhat Hanh reminds us that we need to practice this turning down and tuning in times when we are calm, when the weather of our emotions seems clear, because then we will be able to more easily access this type of listening when we need it. Those of you who were here for our Vespers service last month got a brief introduction to the practice of Lectio Divina, one of my favorite spiritual practices. The practice of Lectio Divina, divine reading, was originally used by monks in the Middle Ages as a way of meditating on or studying scripture. This practice allows us to connect with the piece of writing, whether that be scripture or poetry or prose, and listen for the ways our bodies, our minds, our hearts respond to it. It just involved reading or listening to a piece of writing several times, holding different questions or intentions each time you listen to it. The first time, you might just allow the words to wash over you, noticing the words or phrases that grab your attention. The second time, you might focus your attention on the sensations you notice. What do you see, hear, feel, smell, taste? And the third time, maybe you allow the poem to tell you what it is calling you to do. Is it inviting you to engage, listen, live, be differently in some way? Is there a question it invites you to hold? I often sit with the readings for services in a Lectio Divina sort of way, which is a fancy spiritual way of saying, I read it a whole bunch of times, trying to make sense of it, and trying to hear what it is calling me to say. What I love about this practice is the way that I can sit with the same piece at different times and hear it entirely differently. I can hear it at one time and be called to a particular line I think is the main point, but hear an entirely different main point the next time I listen. I don't know how many times I've heard Robert Frost's poem, but I feel sure that mostly I've been called to those last few lines. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. When we read or hear or even just see this poem being referenced, I think that is often the main point, isn't it? Take the road less traveled. It will make all the difference. And maybe that is the answer you are seeking in this moment. Maybe when you turn down radio nonstop thinking, you hear that voice that is telling you this is the sign you have been waiting for to make that difficult or scary or unpopular choice. But when I sat with the poem this time, the phrase that speaks to me is knowing how way leads on to way. Knowing how way leads on to way. I loved Kimberly's exercise during the Time for All Ages. We stop and we listen. We listen to what our bodies and minds are telling us. We check to make sure we aren't making a decision based out of anxiety or fear. And honestly, maybe we are, and that can be okay too. Because we are experiencing what is happening in the moment, we allow ourselves to be guided, not to some predestined right choice or some sort of divinely chosen path, but to what Adrienne Marie Brown calls the next most elegant step. An elegant step, she writes, is one that acknowledges what is known and unknown. An elegant step allows humility. In any moment of life, there is a next elegant step, one that is possible and strategic based on who is taking it and where they are trying to go. Find it, and you cannot fail. Find the next most elegant step, and way will lead on to way. We can choose mindfulness, choose listening, choose attention, not because it leads us to what is right, but because it is from that clear place, from which we are able to take the next most elegant step, to find the place where way leads on to way. If Frost had chosen the path more traveled, he would have had a different experience and written a different poem. But way would have led on to way regardless. If I had gone and sat and stared at my computer screen rather than wandering around the library and finding Thich Nhat Hanh, I would have written a different sermon. Some of you might have liked that sermon better or needed it more or heard that sermon differently. But that way led to this way. And so we find ourselves here together in this moment, along this path that leads to the next path, the next way that we will take. And so we have a choice. Given that we are here, let's take a moment and listen to where our own silence is moving us. We will sit in quiet for a moment together. Then Bonnie will lead us in singing hymn number 391, Voice Still and Small. We will sing it twice through, and you may remain seated. The Reverend Dr. Sandra Fees writes, "Here's where Unitarian Universalists sometimes get off track. Sometimes you mistake the focus on listening to self with a fierce individualism and independence. But listening to self actually turns out to be inseparable from listening to others. Just as honoring each person's worth and dignity is inseparable from honoring the interconnection of all people, so the attentiveness to the self is inextricably related to attentiveness to the other, to a greater wholeness. Ultimately, deep listening connects to the spirit in all, in us, in each other, in the universe, in other beings. We are called to be faithful to our inner lives so that we can be faithful to the outer world as well. It's often hard to wrap our minds around the fact that we are not listening to change or fix or transform our experience. We are not listening to try to tune into some special God frequency so that we might be pushed in the right direction. We are listening to understand ourselves, our experience, our place in the world. We are listening so way will lead on to way, and so we might find our place in the world. We listen to ourselves so when our friends or loved ones come to us with joy or in crisis, we can be fully present with them. We have known and held our own joy and our own suffering so we can be present with the joy and suffering of others. We listen to ourselves so that when we are in meetings at work or at church or with our community action groups, we can sit with the pain, the conflict, the challenge that arises, and still hear our own voice. Not in a way that doubles down. We tune in and hear our own voice that tells us, hold strong to what you know is right. Or maybe we tune in and hear our own voice that tells us, here are things you didn't know. Let's reevaluate what is right. Or maybe we tune in and hear our own voice that tells us, oof, I have feelings about the way I acted in the past or what I used to believe. I hold those feelings tenderly, knowing that way is leading on to way, and I can take the next most elegant step. We can only listen deeply to one another when we know how to listen deeply and with love to ourselves. May we find the stillness and the spaciousness to listen deeply, and then may we allow the way to unfold.
A simple yet powerful way for each of us to help heal the world is to learn about and support the good works of charitable organizations and become more involved in our community. Every Sunday, UUCR shares half the money received in the collection plate to a nonprofit organization that shares our UU values. This month's Share the Plate recipient is North Shore Alliance of Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, and Transgender Youth, NAGLY. NAGLY's mission is to honor, respect, educate, and empower LGBTQ youth, ages 10 to 23. They offer programs, meetings, clubs, activities, and events for LGBTQ youth, their families, and allies, so they can come together and support one another. NAGLY is located in Salem and serves LGBTQ youth on the North Shore and beyond. This facility includes a youth lounge with comfy furniture, audiovisual equipment, a library with computers and books, a boutique with gently used clothing, an information center, a health and wellness room, meeting and recreation space. Our congregation exists and thrives through the gifts from those who call this place their spiritual home. If you are here with us in the sanctuary, you may put your gift in the collection plate as it goes by. Otherwise, you make a gift online or send a check. Please give as generously as you are willing and able to our Share the Plate offering to support NAGLI and the mission of UUCR. If this is your first time with us, your presence is gift enough. Thank you.
I'm Melissa Martin, your Member Services and Volunteer Coordinator, and my pronouns are she and her. UUCR's Committee on Ministry would love the chance to talk with you about your hopes and dreams about the hiring of our next minister. They're offering the 3 opportunities for conversation this month and hopes that everyone will have a chance to be heard. So please consider joining them on Wednesday, October 16th, directly after our 7 p.m. Vesper service, or via Zoom on Sunday, October 20th, following our congregational meeting, or by emailing them directly to set up a phone conversation. They'll also have a table in Fellowship Hall today so you can get more information. In just 4 weeks, we will begin our campus-wide setup for our Kris Kringle Fair. It will be held on Saturday, November 9th from 9 to 2. This major church fundraiser is only made possible when every member of our church family participates. You can help ensure its success by stopping by the fair table today to sign up for a role. There are opportunities to help before, during, and after the fair, and your time and resources will directly support the good work of the church. So please stop by the table today. In our congregational life this week, our Buddhist meditation group meets Monday evening, both in person in Fellowship Hall as well as on Zoom. And our meditation leader, Ken Flanders, is also starting a beginner series for Qigong on Zoom on Saturday mornings. So please see Ken during the fair if you'd like to know more. Join Reverend Laura this Tuesday for Building Resilience and Resistance, an opportunity to center on various topics impacting us today, with a focus on 3 elements for building resilience and resistance together: self-care, community care, and action. All are welcome. Just drop in as you're able. Rabbi Bart Perlman, whose Havurah group rents our campus for their Jewish holidays, invites you to join them for Yom Kippur services here on Friday and Saturday. You can find those details on our church calendar. I also wanted to mention you probably received email yesterday from the governing board with the congregational meeting warrant. It is here in 2 weeks in the sanctuary at 10 a.m. and also via Zoom. So please pay attention to those emails. That will be in lieu of an actual service as one of our community connections here in our congregation. And a great way to learn about all of the ministries of our church is to come to the Connection Fair. So come connect with our teams, learn from our leaders, and explore various ways that you can get involved immediately after service. Thank you to all of our volunteers today. Thank you to all who are here with us. Thank you for being a vital part of our congregational life. And now, please rise in body or in spirit and join us in singing our closing hymn, number 1007, There's a River Flowing in My Soul.
Please join me in our chalice extinguishing words, which can be found on those laminated sheets. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Our benediction comes from the Reverend Leslie Takahashi. She says, "Walk the maze within your heart. Guide your steps into its questioning curves. This labyrinth is a puzzle leading you deeper into your own truths. Listen in the twists and turns. Listen in the openness within all searching. Listen. A wisdom within you calls to a wisdom beyond you, and in that dialogue lies peace." Blessed be.